Hi, and welcome to the Free Your Spirit podcast. I'm your guide, Carole Frey, founder of Free Spirited Wanderer, a conscious wellness business of yoga retreats, lifestyle coaching, and yoga teacher mentorship. In this podcast, we explore conscious business, yoga on and off the mat, and general lifestyle. Our aim is to help you live a more fulfilling and purposeful life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, yoga student, yoga teacher, or simply someone looking to make positive changes in your daily life. Join us as we share insights, tips, and stories to inspire you on your path to a more free-spirited life. So sit back, relax, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, adventure, and expansion. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Free Your Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Carole Frey. Today's episode, we have a very special guest, Shanna Small, and we will be discussing what is yoga. So Shanna is a yoga teacher who lives in the Charlotte area, and she believes that yoga should be inclusive and available to all who wish to practice. Her classes, workshops, and trainings bravely and unapologetically address issues in the yoga community that make people feel like they do not belong. She seeks to bring those who have been pushed to the margins back into the heart of yoga. So Shanna and I met in 2017 when I started practicing Ashtanga yoga with the Ashtanga Yoga School in Charlotte. And I felt super fortunate to have her as a teacher in this program and to continue my studies with her through a year-long Ashtanga immersion, Yoga Sutra studies, and a yoga and social studies immersion. I have really thoroughly enjoyed following Shanna on Instagram for the past 5 years and learning more about social justice, accessibility, and yoga philosophy, and more. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast and dive deep into what is yoga. Hi, Shanna. How are you?
I am good, enjoying the sunshine. It's been so beautiful.
Yes, I know. It's been so nice to be able to work outside and be outside again. Feel like spring is here.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited for this episode and to have you on here. You were one of the first people when I was thinking about guest speakers that I wanted to have, and you just popped right into my mind because I just love the way that you speak so freely and openly on your Instagram, and I love how you share things and how it comes through, and I'm just really excited that people get to hear what you have to say.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we'll just dive right in. So today's topic, like I said, is what is yoga? So Shanna, what is the goal of yoga?
So the goal of yoga has always been liberation. Any yogic text that anyone ever gets their hands on, everything always leads back to liberation. It leads back to liberation from the cycle of suffering that we often see on this earth. It's like this roller coaster that just continually goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And what yoga is trying to teach us to do is to get off of the roller coaster, or at least if you're not going to get off of it, learn how to enjoy all the ups and downs instead of letting our emotions be dragged along with it. So all yoga is about finding that liberation from being dragged around by the ups and downs of life.
Yes, I love that. So in order for us to really attain and find this goal, how do we find a path that is right for us?
So I definitely recommend that people take time to try out different lineages, to study with different teachers before settling down on a path. This is incredibly hard, or harder than people think in this world, because a lot of what is out there really is only about one part of yoga, which is asana, which is the physical movements. And it's very hard to find schools of yoga and teachers that go beyond that one aspect of yoga. And it's important to go beyond that one aspect, because if we only look at things from the realm of the body, we're going to stay on that roller coaster, because the roller coaster really is happening within the realm of our mind. And so if we're not studying with someone who can help us to start to look at the ways that we react in our everyday life, then we'll always be on that roller coaster. We'll never get off of that roller coaster. And unfortunately, in this day and time, it's extremely hard to find. Usually the low-hanging fruit are places and teachers that focus specifically on the body. And this is fine for a while because it's our gateway. Our body is something that we connect to because we use it all day, every day. And so it can be a way to open us up to start that process of yoga. But if we stop there, we won't go deep enough in order to get off of that roller coaster, which is what yoga is trying to get us to do. So it can take a while, but fortunately, we live in the information age where information is at our fingertips. Like, for instance, tomorrow, taking a class with a teacher I've been studying with for a minute who's in India, right? And I'm sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's like all of these teachers now are so available to us. So as you start to, research online, get on Instagram, read books, and start to look around, you'll like be led down these paths of this person will be like, well, this person was my teacher. And you're like, well, let's see about that person. And then you'll keep going down these little paths. And eventually you'll find something that really just speaks to your heart. And then at that point, I recommend just digging in for a while because we've got to take away layers. Like it's like peeling an onion. And so we've got to take off layers. And this process takes a while. So you want to, find that path, stick with it for a while, really allow it to change you, to grow you, to take away those layers. But I'll wrap it up by saying you are in an amazing day and age that you can, through self-discovery, find a teacher that is right for you. And it just takes patience and having the mind of a seeker, not just settling for the first thing that comes along, not in getting frustrated, when that is not the right thing for you, just continuing to move. But you will find it because there's just so much out there right now that you can learn from me too.
Yeah. I love how you say this too, to really, explore different things and find, different teachers and different paths. And, I think back to 2017 when I found Ashtanga, and the reason I feel like I stumbled upon it at the perfect time, but I felt really complacent in my practice. And I was doing, these hot power yoga classes, and I felt like I just hit this plateau. And obviously there's always room to grow and different things to do, but I felt like I wasn't getting what I knew I could get or like what I was seeking from these classes. So I really wanted to go deeper. And when I found the Ashtanga, I knew about the Ashtanga program for 2 years, and I kept telling myself, I can't wake up at 4:30. There's no way. And then finally, that calling inside of me was so loud that I needed to do something different, that I was like, all right, you're going to get your ass out of bed and you're going to go practice at 5:30 in the morning. And then meeting you and meeting Shanna Smith and just having you two was awesome. And I did enjoy, an ML too. And one thing, it's cool to have different teachers also because you learn differently from different people, right? Like sometimes someone says one thing and it just hits, and then someone says something a little bit differently and then that hits. So I just love that exploring, like you've said, and just continuing on that path, and then sticking with something too, because I think a lot of times, we would see this in Ashtanga all the time where people would come for a week or two, maybe a month, and then they would just stop. And it's you have to get over that hump. And when you get over that hump, it's so awesome and it's hard as hell, but it's the benefits that come from it are just so amazing. So I just love how you spoke to that because it's something that, I've obviously experienced in my life. And I feel like I see other people that sometimes, just try one thing and stick with it. And I'm just there's so much more out there. And the fact we can study with people in India and all over the world right now through technology is really, really awesome. So I love what you just said and shared all of that. So thank you.
what we are for seeking is seeking us. You hear that saying all the time, and it sounds so like Pollyanna-ish, but it really is true. It's what I've seen in my life, that if I open myself up and I start to listen to that quiet voice within, that I will be led to the next step and to the next step and to the next step. And that's part of the spiritual journey. Like, that's actually the doing of the yoga, honestly. The whole allowing ourselves to be guided by that small voice of intuition to that next step. And I really believe that if you're really wanting to learn yoga, it'll happen for you that way.
Yes. I love that. Thank you. So the next question I have, this is the hard part, I feel like, and I guess I kind of mentioned this, but, what do we need in order to sustain this path?
Yeah, that is the hard part. And I often say to people, like, that's the yoga.
Right.
Like, what if that was the actual yoga? It is the actual getting up and doing the thing, whatever that is, whether that is getting up and living our life in a way that embodies yoga, whether or not that's getting up and going to a class. That is that process of yoga, and it is difficult. And as you said, you've got to get over the hump. There's got to be something inside of you that wants freedom, more than staying the same.
Yes.
And that's going to take stumbling a lot for a lot of people to find that. It's going to take, unfortunately, like, bad things happening. It's going to take pain. It's going to take suffering from most people to finally wake up one day and be like, I just can't do this anymore. And I am willing to do whatever it takes in order to get off of this roller coaster, this cycle of samsara, as they call it, this constant up and down and up and down and up and down. And when it hits you enough, you will find something that speaks to your heart and you'll stick with it. And all schools of yoga have their frameworks for helping us to stay on the path. So built into the yoga are the things that are going to help you to stay on your path. But as you said, Carole, you have to, get over that hump and want to feel good more than you want to stay the same. And there is some comfort in staying the same because, as people say, it's the devil we know is what we're used to. And there's some comfort there. So I think we have to really be compassionate with ourselves, because the first part of that yoga journey is going to be that dealing with that part of us that wants things to stay the same. And then having that small voice that's like, no, we cannot stay here. This is not where we need to be. And you're going to find yourself battling that. And one day that one little voice is going to win out. It's going to win out. And you're going to figure out what it is that you need to do in order to stay on your journey. And there's all types of little tricks, but you'll figure it out and you can do it.
Yeah. And I feel like, for me, I think about that. And that is when we really do start to take yoga off the mat. Because so for when I decided I wanted to do Ashtanga and I realized like how much I was drawn to it and loved it, it made me have to, I had to look at my entire lifestyle, and it made me change a lot of things. I was like, I can't eat a late dinner. I can't drink wine before practice, and I have to wake up earlier. So what I really loved was like, yes, I had these great, it helped me on the mat, obviously, like my, just all the things that yoga helps us on the mat. But then I just noticed how it impacted my life as well. And just like I could start making these other lifestyle changes too. And the things that I was so comfortable in, like I was forced to have to change that if I really wanted this practice, and that's the thing too. It's like our lifestyle shows up on the mat. When you drink that glass of wine, like you feel that in Ashtanga the next day, or if you ate too late, or the stress, whatever else is showing up. So I feel like, I come back to like finding that right path that does work for us, and like finding those things that are like, okay, this matters to me more than staying up late and watching an extra episode of my show. And then, of course, the studies of yoga as well, obviously, then just the physical practice. But like you said, like we relate to that so easily as well. So yeah, awesome.
That's the magic of yoga, is that if we're on the right path, that we will start to change. And that's one of the ways that we know, honestly. Yeah. And it's also one of the ways we know if our Sangha or our community or our teachers are maybe not on that. We should be growing and we should be evolving. Like if you are the same person, if you've been practicing yoga for 5-10 years and you're the same person, it's actually a sign that it's not evolving and the yoga is not working. But that is how yoga works, is that over time, we start to want to make changes. Like we just want to. There's a calling, like I want to feel good when I wake up in the morning. So I'm going to go to bed a little bit earlier. I'm going to change how I eat over here because if it really sucks when I practice and I'm eating that way. It starts to happen. We start to change and we start to evolve. And that's why I love yoga so much. It's amazing that we don't need, thou shalt nots and any of that stuff. That if we do our practices, they will slowly reveal what needs to change, because what needs to change is what is blocking our luminosity, what is blocking who we are, what is blocking our wealth, what is blocking our health, what's blocking our happiness. All of that we will start to see it so clearly, which could be so scary for so many people, because when you start to see it, you can't unsee it. Right? You can't unsee it, and you have to do something about it. But I love it. It's the fast path, honestly, to spirituality and enlightenment, so they say.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I could keep talking about even just this forever, but I'm going to continue. So what do you think makes someone a yoga practitioner?
So to me, a yogi is someone who is trying to get off of that cycle of samsara. Like that is their primary directive, is how do I stop the suffering in my own life? And also, how do I take that into the world and help do something about the suffering of others? And there's many definitions of yoga, but they all lead to the same thing. They all lead to this place of using the body and the mind to delve deeply into ourselves until we figure out who and what we are. And once we figure that out, then we're no longer being dragged by the nose by everything that's happening in the world, because we know who we are and no one can take us off of our seat at that point. It doesn't matter what's going on, outside the window. It doesn't matter, because we are so firm in our seat. And that's what asana is. It's a seat. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just a yoga pose. But it's a seat. We are so firm in our seat, it does not matter what is going on around us. We are unmovable, unmessable with. And this is what the yogic journey is about. So to me, that is a yogi, someone who has that as their prime directive. Doesn't matter what I am, what I'm doing in my life, whether or not I'm doing a practice on a mat, whether or not I'm hanging out at the park with my family, whether or not I'm sitting at a meal, I'm asking myself, is there anything that I'm doing right now that's going to lead to suffering for myself or for someone else? And if there is, as a yogi, I'm going to address it. I'm going to change it. I'm going to work with it. And I'm going to always be looking at what is out here that's going to take me out of my seat. And how can I use my practices to really firmly get myself back into my seat, back into my body, back into who and what I truly am? That to me is what a yogi is. And it's a constant internal journey of asking and contemplation and looking and sitting with. And so it's not for everyone, because everyone's not going to want to do that. Everyone's not going to want to question their thoughts and what's in front of them. It's a tough path, but it's so rewarding, because at the end of this path, end is not the word, I guess I'll use end. The end of this path is that peace that we've been looking for, that ability to stay so grounded within ourselves that we are not dragged around. And to me, that is worth all of that contemplation and looking that I need to do. And so to me, that is a yogi. That's someone who is constantly always asking themselves, how can I live dharmically? How can I live in a way that's peaceful and harmonious with this world? And when we do that, the suffering ceases.
Awesome. And so one thing I want to point out that you didn't really say anything about, having to go to these hot yoga classes every day, or having to do like this physical practice every single day, or you have to be able to do a handstand. And I think so often, we kind of throw around the term yogi really lightly and kind of throw out like what a yoga practitioner is. So I really appreciate the definition you just gave, and like everything that comes about it, that it's not just like getting on your mat and like sweating and doing these handstands and these postures. And like, yes, that can be a part of it, but it's like remembering what you're learning in the process of doing that handstand. Like, why do you want to do that handstand? Like, well, how is it going to benefit you in your life? Or does it just make for a great Instagram photo? So I love the definition that you gave for that, because I think, we can misinterpret it. And it's really hard to, again, like when yoga came to the West, and we don't know a lot of this stuff. Like a lot of people don't. And, I sometimes get upset that a lot of people don't. But then I'm also like, okay, well, it's also us as a society and as teachers to get this out there and to share that. So I hope that offers like a lot of light to people on what a yoga practitioner is. And, there's obviously can be other definitions too. But so yes, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now, what can we do as yoga practitioners and teachers to preserve the roots of yoga?
So as yoga practitioners and teachers, I think if we really say that we're yoga practitioners and teachers,
right? Maybe let's go back to that.
I know, right? That we should constantly be learning, constantly be studying. Like that's what Svadhyaya is. It's one of the limbs of yoga. And a lot of times people look at it as this, well, I'm just looking at myself, which is important because I just talked about that. But that's not what that word really means traditionally. Traditionally, it means that we're constantly studying scriptures and text and with teachers and doing mantras. That's really what it all encompasses. So that if we really say that we are practitioners of yoga, if we really say that we are teachers of yoga, the study should be continuous. Because one of the big ways that yoga teaches us that we find freedom from suffering is from jnana, which is through knowledge. So that right there lets us know that we should always be seeking knowledge. And it doesn't necessarily have to be book knowledge, but we should always be seeking knowledge. And so to me, if someone is not constantly seeking knowledge and depth within their yoga practice and within their yoga teaching, that maybe they're not really practicing yoga, which is fine. And I really want to put that out there, is that if someone is coming to the practice and they are just looking for physical, that's fine. And I know we still use the word yoga practice for it. To me, that's not really a yoga practice, but still, if that's what someone wants and needs,
yes,
and they know that that is what they're doing, then that is fine. If they know that within their life right now, that's what they've decided, okay, that's one thing. But it's another thing to delude ourselves into thinking that we're on this path of yoga when we're not even interested in the culture and the text and the knowledge that goes with yoga.
Sorry, go ahead.
And it's just so important, because something that a lot of people don't realize is that the context of what we're learning is super important. And you can only get that context by studying from teachers from the source culture, or studying from books from the source culture, which is, we're going to say India for lack of going into a lot of discussion here. But we have to go back and understand the context. Because without understanding that context, a lot of the things that we study can actually be misunderstood. And misunderstanding is one of the obstacles of yoga, which is mentioned in yogic texts.
Yes.
So honestly, we can't even really have a yoga practice with any depth if we don't understand the source culture, what was going on at the time when all of this came around, what these words and these things meant in that culture, and without really having access to the teachers and the knowledge and the books and all the things that come from that culture, we really will have a version of yoga which is honestly only seen through the lens of our own culture, which is highly problematic because the information did not come from this culture.
Right.
So that means that we don't have the full picture. So it is, if we really, really are like, I am a yogi, this is what I'm choosing as my spiritual path, this is my spiritual journey, then to me, in order to really skyrocket and move quickly on that journey, we have to be constantly learning, constantly opening ourselves up to understanding.
Yes. I feel like I have so many things I could say to that right now, but one of them, so I've been really committing to reading like the Yoga Sutras again. And so a couple of things. I remember one part, of course, I don't remember which one, but I have Satchidananda's, and he was saying how, you continue to study and read these in different like different times in your life, because you understand it more and more the more time you've have done it. And it's so funny because even, we do Yoga Sutras with Jana on Sundays still, and she always goes over like 1 through 4 in the beginning. And like, I find myself really quickly sometimes being like, oh, we're doing this again. Like, I know this, but it's so funny because I get something different out of it every time, and I have a better understanding for it. So I always have to catch myself and being like, oh, we're doing this again. And it's like, yes, Carole, that's the point. And then really learning how to like apply it to your life. And like, you hear something one time and you're just like, oh, now I understand that, where maybe before I just kind of read it. And I was saying to Jana too, I was like, I wish on some of these they explained more, like I want more. And she's like, that's why you have a teacher, the teacher to help you and explain to you. So I really, like, for me, I've loved like the Yoga Sutra studies just because it's nice to be able to talk with other people about it too, and like have an understanding, of this text from 5,000 years ago. And it's like, how can I relate this to my life in North Carolina doing what I'm doing today? And then, you figure out, like, you see that on your mat, and then you're like, the practice on your mat helps you obtain that. And, of course, everything's woven together. But yeah, I've been like, we're just really enjoying like diving deeper into that too. And, I wish we had more yoga studies around and like Yoga Sutra studies, because it's really hard. I mean, like, you and Jana are the only people I really know that do it in our area, and maybe there's a few more. But it's like, it's such an important piece that we really miss out on. And of course, then it's like, if students don't understand that that's a big part of it, when I do yoga retreats and we go over the 8 limbs, like a majority of people haven't even heard of the 8 limbs. And then there's a part of me that's like, shit, I'm not doing my job as a yoga teacher in my 60-minute class, but then it's like, okay, how do you fit time in your 60-minute asana class to go over the 8 limbs? And of course, that's maybe a different discussion, but it kind of makes you think about what you can do as a yoga teacher and as a yoga practitioner. But it's like, how can we get that knowledge out there of what this really is and what all of this entails? And it's not just, hey, I'm going to take 60 minutes and go practice today. And like, yes, that's amazing. And I love that people do that. But it's like, okay, what else can we do? Like, can we take 5 minutes to read one Yoga Sutra? Or, Google too. Like, we forget about Google, like, find these resources on Google or Instagram too. There's, that's another world. There's a lot of great people on Instagram. Like you're one of the people I've learned a lot from, a bunch of other people too. But anyway, so, I guess it comes back to too, like finding your teacher, finding your path, pick someone that is embodying the teachings and the practice, and that you also want to embody that as well. So yeah.
And don't settle. Don't settle. I see a lot of people settling. Don't settle. You are worth it. You being free from suffering, your spiritual journey, you being fully who you are is worth it. Don't settle.
I have chills right now. You just said that.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's because then we think about like, where are we settling in other areas of our life too, So, yeah. Okay. So now how can we truly live our yoga, taking it off the mat and into our daily lives? I know we've kind of talked about this, but I guess how would you summarize this?
So, I mean, really, that is the yoga. Like, that really is it. I mean, it's like are you really doing yoga if you're not taking it into your daily life? Like, I recently wrote a post on Instagram, and that post was about how we understand how to be strong in our minds when we're on our mat, and we use that strength to be able to hold up, a pose for 30 seconds, or to really work on that pose that's really challenging to us, right? This is just an example of how to do it. But then we go out in the world, and when someone challenges, say, maybe our racism, if somebody challenges our sexism, if someone challenges our ableism, if someone challenges our privilege, if someone challenges any of that, then we fall apart, right? That's an example of the yoga is not happening off the mat, that the yoga is staying within the realm of the body. So we're taking everything, that same strength that we're using and we're cultivating to be able to work on a pose that we, has been our nemesis for years, and to continuously show up and work on that pose every day. We're taking that same thing out into the world to deal with all the things that make us feel uncomfortable. Because sometimes getting off of that roller coaster means that you have to understand that dip is coming. And you gotta not deny that it's coming. You can't look the other way. Close your eyes. Right. You're like, okay, the dip is coming. This is going to be so uncomfortable, but I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to experience this, and I'm going to go through it. And then when the dip comes again, maybe this time you're not as scared. Yeah. You feel more ready. And then eventually it's like, oh, it's coming, whatever. Yeah. Just gonna strap in a little bit, but it's gonna be fine, right? And that's where we're trying to go. So it's like whatever it is that we learn, that strength that a lot of people spend so much time cultivating on their mats, take it into your life. When something comes up and it makes you uncomfortable, just like you sit, in that warrior one that your teacher has you holding for a couple of minutes, you want to look at, okay, why am I uncomfortable here? If I'm uncomfortable, what is it that needs to be taught? What is it that I need to learn? Because that is what the uncomfortableness is there for. It's saying you need to look at your patterns. Yes. That's what awful pain does in our body. It tells us that something is wrong. You need to stop. You need to pay attention to me. That's what our body says when it's in pain. And it's the same thing our mind is saying. So we can take that strength that we've cultivated on the mat to be able to stay with the practice or pose for a while, and take it and apply that to all the things that are making us uncomfortable also in our lives. And that's how we start to take that yoga off the mat and we take it into the world. So anything that we're using within our yoga mat, then we want to take that out into the world and use it on our mind. Because yoga really is psychology. Yeah. It is an ancient method of psychology. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. And so if we can take that and we can apply that psychology to all the things that are coming up in our lives, then we are taking that yoga off of the mat. But if we're only doing it on the mat, and then we're continuing to just, close our eyes and be fragile out here in the world, then we're stopping our development, we're stopping our growth, and we're keeping ourselves on that roller coaster because we won't open our eyes and see, I'm up high. Okay. I feel uncomfortable. I'm up high on this thing. I'm a little afraid. How can I breathe? How can I work with my feelings of fear, the fear of death, the fear of change, the fear of that is what the yoga is. Mm-hmm. That really is what it is. So that is how we take it off the mat. Whatever you're learning on that mat, how can you take it out into your everyday life and start to apply those principles, that is taking that yoga off of the mat.
It's interesting too how you talk about, being uncomfortable with things, because one of the things I see today is that a lot of people actually are not teaching the roots of yoga because they think it makes people uncomfortable. Like I've heard that like Om is not allowed in classes or Sanskrit or mantras, and they're not teaching these things because they think it makes other people uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, that's part of the work in teaching what this is. That's how we preserve this practice. So it's just, I guess it just made me think of that. I don't know if you have anything else to comment on that, but it's funny to me how we're just like washing over the roots of this to try to make people comfortable and really to make people come. And then you give off the wrong impression of what yoga is because we're not teaching, some of these things. And I know there's times that I can do a better job too. So it always makes you look at what you're doing as a student and a teacher too. But it's just interesting to see that so much today. Yeah.
And it's a shame because a lot of the magic, that's another thing about yoga. A lot of people don't know that yoga is actually magic. A lot of the magic of yoga is in that stuff.
Yes.
It's in the Om.
Right.
It's in the energy that happens when we Om. It's the way that the energy of the Om literally physically affects our cells.
I bawled my eyes out.
Sound. Yeah, it's the way that the sound affects us. It's the way that frequency, it tunes us into the whole frequency of the universe. And these are things that don't get taught in yoga, and people don't know it and they don't understand it. That mantras are actually magic words used with a certain language and a certain tone that helps us to connect to certain frequencies that are happening in the universe. And this is not woo-woo stuff. Everything is sound, everything is energy, everything is frequency. That's why when they hook us up, our brains up to a machine, the little machine is like doing things because of the electricity and the energy that is going through our minds. It's how they can tell if we're dead or thinking or what is going on with us. It's because of that. And so these mantras and all this stuff get us in tune with all of those frequencies that are in the universe. And we lose that stuff. Like that stuff is magical, and it can do really, really, really deep healing.
Yes.
That people lose when they try to take those things out. There is a sweetness in the yoga practice, honestly, that I never got until I started embracing that part of the yoga practice.
That's what I
love. So yang, so hard, so rough. And that energy was building up in me. I lost my gentleness. I lost my softness, because the gentleness and the softness is in the Om, it's in the mantras, it's in all of that stuff that brings back in that sweetness. Right. And that sweetness is nature and love. And people, it's just sad because it's like, you don't know what you're saying. You are just cutting yourself off.
It's a limitation.
How limiting.
Right? Because it's like, and that's how, you connect to your higher self and the world around you through learning some of these mantras, like literally. And it gives you a better understanding of like, this is why I'm doing this. Like, this is what I'm learning to unravel or overcome, or this is what I'm coming back home to. And, for me, it's even doing them has healed a lot of like anxiety in me too, just because I remember like, everything's going to be okay. And maybe, that's my big takeaway sometimes. Or it's like, okay, I can heal myself through this. Like, and if I'm super distracted or having a really tough day or feeling super anxious, I will literally grab my mala and work with one of my mantras and just try to come back to that space and that peace and like refocus my energy in that direction. So it's one of these things like, I'm so happy I have these tools and these techniques to come back home to, because what would I do? I would reach for the glass of wine if I didn't reach for the mala. So for me, that's why these things are so important too. And that's
kind of easy to teach if people really like want to.
Right.
Like, we understand the power of sound.
Right.
Like, we understand that when we're feeling certain emotions, we turn on certain songs. Like, we understand that, and how those songs change our whole mood and how we feel. And we understand the power of sound. And it's it's not the same, but it's very similar to when we do our ohms and our mantras and all this stuff. It's powerful. Powerful.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great word to summarize it. Powerful. And I know for me, like, I want to feel more powerful in my life, and I want to help other people feel more powerful in their lives. So, yes. Okay, awesome. So now for like, what is yoga to you, and what does your daily practice consist of right now? I guess we'll say, because I know these. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my daily practice looks like I have mantra sadhana. So when I get up in the morning, I've been initiated into mantras by one of my teachers. Her name is Kaya Mendlin, and you can find her easily online. But anyway, so I've been initiated into mantra sadhana. So I get up in the morning and I usually start with contemplation, what I call contemplation. And some schools of yoga call meditation, honestly. But I sit in front of an altar that I've created with things that are important to me, things that make me feel connected to the world, to love, to harmony, to the universe. And I have these things collected, and I'm looking over here to the side. Listeners don't know that, but I'm looking because it's right here. And so I go over to that space that I have also things like flowers, scented water, beeswax candles that have that lovely scent, nice incense. I have all this set up. And then I have, pictures of ancestors. And so all this is over here. And I go to this place and I sit in silence there. And I allow what needs to come forth. Sometimes it's thoughts, sometimes it's emotions, sometimes it's intuition, it's wisdom. I sit and I allow these things to happen. And then I do my mantras, which kind of hones in that communication even more. So do the mantras. And usually by the time I'm done with the mantra, if there was anything sitting on my heart, if there was any question that I had, anything that I needed to know, it's come through during that session with the mantras. And then at the end of that, I'll sit just a little bit longer, see if there's anything else that needs to come through. And then from there, then and only then do I do physical movement. And each day it is different. Sometimes it's more restorative. Sometimes it's more vigorous. It just really depends. And then I'll do some type of physical movement after that. And then from there, I go on about my day. But my day is always has, like my teacher Kaya tells us that, Dharma should always be at the top.
Love that.
Dharma, our ability to live in harmony with the universe in a way that's not harming, should be at the top of our to-do list every single day. So that's how I live my whole entire life. That Dharma is at the top of my to-do list, and it's not written on the paper, but mentally it's there always. Awesome. And so my whole day is about how can I create more harmony within myself, within this world, harmony in even the foods that I'm cooking, even the way I clean the house, even the way I pay the bills, even the way that I answer the email, even the way all of this becomes yoga. Yes. So that way I'm doing yoga the whole entire day, all day long, whether I, do mundane things of the world that we, like cleaning the house and paying the bills, or whether or not I wind up picking up a book later on in the day and reading. It does not matter. Like my whole entire day to me is yoga. I really fully believe that in living yoga and that we start to align ourselves with the universe when we live yoga 100% of our day, 24 hours, 7 days a week. We start to get in alignment with the universe, and then things start to fall in place.
Yes, that is so true.
Things start to fall in place, and your life no longer is a struggle. It doesn't mean that hard things didn't happen, but there's this feeling of letting go of the struggle, that I can do hard things without the anxiety and all the stress that comes up within me, that I am equipped to be able to do anything that comes to me. I am fully equipped and ready for it. And this is the attitude that starts to come up as we start to live our yoga. And it's beautiful, it's harmonious, it's loving, and it's available to anyone, to anyone who wants it.
I feel like that's such a great way to know that your yoga is working. And I remember that too when I served tables for a really long time, like starting at 15 up to like a few years ago. And that was one of the big, so I took a break between serving tables for a while. And when I came back to it, I was doing the Ashtanga practice. And I could tell such a difference in the way I handled, because I used to get so stressed, so overwhelmed. I hated it. I didn't hate it, but it was a lot. And I noticed such a shift in myself of the way I handled the hard things that happened there and how I handled other people. And I remember thinking like, wow, my yoga practice is working and I can see it in my everyday life. And then I can call myself out when I'm at a stoplight and I'm yelling at someone who's sitting at a green light or whatever, and I can catch myself to come back to it too, which is also, like you said, the self-awareness and having that self-awareness and coming back to that too, and knowing when we're not practicing the yoga, which I definitely have to catch myself, but also being able to see the areas of your life where like, wow, my yoga practice is working for me. So I love how you're, living your yoga. Awesome. So I just have a couple more questions. So what wisdom can you offer someone looking to begin a yoga practice?
You got this. You got this. Start anywhere. Start anywhere. So if all of this stuff just sounds like, oh my God, this is all so crazy, start with just taking a moment, 3-4 minutes every day, and just sitting with yourself, taking a few deep breaths, being around something beautiful. That can be nature, that could be some flowers in your house, that can be a stone that someone gave you, and just sitting in that beauty. And because that beauty is you, honestly, it's you. And so you're just using something outside of yourself to reconnect you to what you really and truly are. So even something that is simple, sitting in silence because the silence is you, sitting with something that's beautiful because the beauty is you. And we really start to sit with this, and then we'll start to feel those things start to come up within us. And as they come up, then follow those little threads that start to happen. Follow the voice that's like, I'm going to try out this little yoga studio down the street. Oh, I'm going to try out this little teacher. I'm going to grab this little book. Like, then start to follow those threads. And what I think is as important is that we don't get attached to this idea that yoga means asana. It really can be simple. And we have this tendency to oversimplify everything in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why the world is so crazy right now. But it can be as simple as taking a few minutes. It can even be as you're still laying in bed before you step those feet off of that bed, and just take a few moments listening to the sound of your breath, listening to the sounds of the morning, maybe listening to your partner snore. It could be all of these things that just bring us back into ourselves, into our body, wakes us up, brings us fully into our being. And then over time, those things start to get longer and they start to become more ritualized. That's what the yoga practice is, doing the asanas, that ritualization of that self-discovery process. Doing the mantras that I do is the ritualization of that self-discovery practice. But it can be as simple as, I'm going to lay here, I'm going to feel my body, I'm going to hear my breath, I'm going to let everything just come through, let it be, let it arrive, and that will start to take you places. It really can be that simple.
Yeah, I love that. Coming back to simplicity, it's so important. And then, so what wisdom can you offer someone looking to become a yoga teacher?
What wisdom can I offer? Practice yoga. So many people don't practice. So many teachers don't actually practice yoga. That's just the bottom line. There's a lot of people out here who don't really practice yoga. And when I say practice yoga, I mean 24/7. I mean live the life. I mean live the principles. And by living the principles and experiencing them in your body, then you get the true knowledge. In yoga, there's these things called the pramanas, which is those first four. Well, actually, that's like the 6th, 7th verse. But anyway, the jhatam, shiv, yajal.
Yeah, I like that.
There are these ways to know that something is real and something is true. And the first thing on the list is our own experience with the practice. So we cannot be teachers if we are not having our own experiences of the practice. We can't be effective teachers if we're not having our own experience of the practice. That could be the experience of, asana and meditation and all this, but it can also be the experience of moving through the world in an aware state, and that teaches us. Without that, we're not teachers. We're just choreographers, right? We're just choreographing movements, and, screaming at people, until they do the movements. I mean, that's really all it is. To be true yoga teachers, it means that we take everything that we learn and we apply it to ourselves. We live it, and then from living it, other realizations come up and out of that. And then we explore those. So to me, anyone who wants to be a yoga teacher, practice. Learn as much as you can. Practice as much as you can, because when you start to teach, it becomes harder to do the ritualized parts of the practice, meaning like getting on the mat, doing the mantras, because you're serving other people. And so really establish yourself in what your practices are. If that's asana, establish yourself. If it's meditation, establish yourself. If it's mantras, establish yourself. Whatever it is, you get firm, rooted, so rooted that nothing can take you away from it. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're going to be on a plane all day long, you become the person that's like, well, I'm going to see if I can stretch my legs on the plane a little bit. And then I'm going to take a few breaths over here. Like, that's how important it is for you to connect to that yoga every day. And when you know you're that type of person, then and only then, if you're so interested in teaching, then maybe you start to look down into that path. And if you do that, I also recommend don't settle.
Yes.
Don't settle. Find that person that you really want to learn from and really take a deep dive with that person. Don't just settle.
Awesome. This has been so amazing, Shanna. I've loved having you on here. I've taken so much away from this, and I'm sure our listeners have too. So before we wrap up, I know you have some really incredible offerings going on right now. So I would love for you to share those with my listeners.
So coming up, and it should be the end of May, but you can look on my website, shannasmallyoga.com, and also my Instagram, which is Shanna Small Official. Our next program that's coming up is the Living Yoga program. This ties right into what I'm talking about this whole entire podcast. The Living Yoga program, it takes us all the way through summer. And what it does is it gives us concrete, tangible ways of integrating yoga into your life right from the jump. Everything in that program is something that you can use, every single thing. So we're going to be looking at the Bhagavad Gita, which is a great text for people who are struggling with being out here in this world and not knowing what to do. We're going to be working with the Yoga Sutras, and we're going to be looking at the ways that we can take those sutras and applying them to our lives. We're going to have embodied practices on the weekend, yoga asana practices. There's going to be Ayurveda. So you're going to learn that sister science of yoga. You're going to learn about how can I bring health into my body through the way that I nourish myself. And you're going to learn how to do all of that stuff. You're going to learn about that inner and that outer beauty, pranayama. You're going to learn mantras. You're going to learn about ways of working with energy using your fingertips, mudras. It is fantastic. You will absolutely leave knowing how to apply yoga to your life. And if you're new to yoga, you're going to have practices. If you're not new to yoga, you are going to be just enlivened and reawakened and re-inspired to do your practice and to be out there in the world. So it's called Living Yoga. There are scholarships for it. So if you're like, oh, but Shayna, we have scholarships for it. We're trying to make it accessible to everyone. That's a big part of what I do. We have scholarships for it. It's recorded. So it's on Zoom. It's recorded. So if your life gets busy, it's there for you. And then we're available, me and my partner, Victoria Martinez, we're available for question and answer. So if you want to take this program, just message me. Don't let anything stop you. If you look and you're like, oh, but I don't know, just send me a message. I'll make it happen for you.
Oh, I love that. And a lot of you always ask me on teacher trainings that I recommend. So I would definitely highly recommend this. And I really only give ones that I absolutely would recommend also. So, and if you really enjoyed, listening to this episode and you want to be around, learning more from Shanna, and Victoria is also amazing too. I've met her from Ashtanga. She's come in a few times also. So the two of them are absolutely incredible teachers in the Charlotte area. So definitely check them out. And for your convenience, those will be linked in the show notes as well as Shanna's website, Instagram. So you'll have access to that too. So thank you so much for listening. And Shanna, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to kick off my guest speakers with you. So yeah, again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week for our next episode.